Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you might be. It's a pleasure for us to be here with you at this important time for all of us. Before we begin, I would like to tell you that we do have English and Portuguese interpretation. You you will see the button at the bottom of your screen, and you can hear in whichever language is the most useful for you. Thank you for joining us in this webinar. That is the fourth week for tax justice, an activity by the principles of human rights in tax justice. What is this initiative? This was started by eight organizations, five NGOs, Brazil, Summit of Brazil, Argentina, the Justicia from Colombia, one for Mexico, other regional network, the Latin American and Caribbean Tax Fairness Network. We have the REGE representing the global area and two international organizations, the CESR. And our main goal, working together as an initiative, is to contribute to strengthening the bond between tax policies and public spending and tax fairness in human rights. I am Nathalie Beguin, a coordinator from an NGO in Brazil, well, as part of the initiative, and I'm going to moderate this panel today. This webinar includes very interesting people, as you can see, and it is intended to delve into tax justice, South-South cooperation, and regional integration, particularly in Latin America and Africa. The idea then is to discuss what we can learn from each other, how we can work and impact international negotiations, tax issues, particularly in the UN and OECD. And those questions make a lot of sense because recently the Global South has played a key role in tax issues. Thanks to the African Union, the debate was taken to the debate at the UN took on a new life about a framework convention on tax fairness, and in Latin America, we created the intergovernmental platform for taxation and a debate on taxes, which was also included in PLAC. So taxation in the South is gaining traction, and it's been pushed by our southern countries. And what is important in these movements is that what guarantees is to guarantee that the subject is covered in a more inclusive and fair way. Because in these spaces at the UN and the PLAC, we are involving the global South countries and civil society. So we believe that the voices of the people the most affected by taxation fairness are being heard. And so to cover this subject, we have an amazing panel of very qualified people who are experts and academics and activists. We have Dereje Alemayehu for the Global Alliance for Tax Justice, Natalia Quiñones, an expert in taxation, and Cesar, who's an academic and holds a very important position as he's a university president. We are going to start in this order with Dereje, then Natalia, then Cesar. Each one will have 10 minutes to do the presentation, and then we will go back to listen to audience questions before closing. Once again, thank you. Remember that you have the interpretation if you want to hear in either English as you are right now or in Portuguese. And so not to take up any more time, let's start with Dereje. So Dereje, come in. You have 10 minutes.
Muchas gracias. I've not prepared any PowerPoint presentation, and interesting to say, I just came back from a similar meeting in Buenos Aires, Argentina, where also we had a similar seminar with a conference with Natalie, and which also brought together trade unions, politicians, decision makers, civil society to discuss on this issue. Let me start by introducing the Global Alliance for Tax Justice. It is a coalition regional tax justice network members in Africa, Asia, Latin America, Northern America, and Europe. We call ourselves a Southern-led global coalition because it was created in Lima. The current chair is from Red Justicia Fiscal. Red Justicia Fiscal Latin America and Caribbean is a founding member, and the current chair is also from Red Justicia Fiscal. We say it is Southern-led global coalition because we have lived, even in the civil society sector, in a period where Northern institutions and NGOs really spoke on behalf of civil society in the South. And we wanted to end this, and we wanted to speak as a Southern voice, but not for any particular Southern agenda, but to really make it possible for Southern voices to speak on their own behalf and for their own interests. So in that sense, so the Global Alliance started this campaign on two fronts. One was to show that the OECD line is not something that is going to get us to anywhere. And we did a lot of campaign around this, and we submitted once a petition signed by more than 250 civil society organizations around the globe by calling the OECD deal, it is the tax deal of the rich. It is not something in our interest. So our motive was, on one hand, to show what the OECD is up to, that it is not going to get us to any solution. The only solution that we can get is by reverting it to the United Nations, where countries can negotiate as equals without any manipulative secretariat, with transparency, with the participation of not only full members of the UN, but also civil society organizations, where we can hold our governments accountable for the positions they take and they don't take. So that is why we focused on one hand, exposing the OECD procedure to show that their solutions are not adequate. Take pillar one, for which the OECD is claiming a victory and what. It is not yet completed, and there is 100% certainty that it will not be agreed to by the US itself. If you look at the content, it considers only about 86 to 100 multinational companies across the world. This is a very tiny fraction of global actors. And secondly, it claims to redistribute only a marginal, a very small amount of their global profit. If you leave more than 99% of companies outside the scope, if you leave more than 90% of the global profit of multinationals out of scope, where is the solution? If 90% of practices and regulations functions the old way, you cannot claim to have revised a global structure which was created 100 years ago, totally outdated. And now, at this rate, what we can say is, okay, every 100 years, we reform 10% of the mischief. And then we'll maybe at the end of 1,000 years, we'll arrive at getting hold of all the companies doing the mischief. So this is a joke. So that is what we're trying to. And the second important thing is, actually, the OECD knows itself that it is not going to solve the problem. The major issue is for them to prevent the intervention of the UN in the global solution-seeking process. Because all the members, the powerful members of the OECD, when they come to the UN, they always say, leave it, OECD is doing it. Duplication and what? So it shows you it is not about solving the problem. It is about preventing the United Nations from playing its legitimate role. So we did a lot of things around this to expose the inadequacy, the illegitimacy, the lack of transparency, and the biased the nature of the OECD process, which was dominated by rich countries. Our second line of campaign was to bring a UN tax convention high up on the agenda so that countries can meet there in an intergovernmental universal organization to bring about solutions to the problem. This is very important because in the UN, the process is transparent. Countries have equal rights. So we first started the process by submitting with Eurodad as GADGE a discussion paper on UN tax convention. We tried to make countries and negotiators and broader civil society aware of the stakes and the possibility of a UN tax convention. So it is not a demand of civil society, by the way. A UN tax body, a UN-based negotiation for tax was something promoted by the G77. It was first launched in Addis in 2015 during the UN Financing for Development Conference, but it was blocked by rich OECD countries. They said there was a paragraph in the outcome document which called for a UN tax body. The Americans and the other powerful OECD members said, if this clause paragraph is in the outcome document, we are not going to negotiate. They almost forced G77 countries to withdraw it from the outcome document so that it was left out. And then the G77 countries said, just to reach some outcome document, we will withdraw it from this resolution outcome document, but not from our struggle. So I remember there was a emoji that Global Alliance launched at that time on Twitter. It says, see you in New York. So that is what happened. In the meantime, A, the OECD was not delivering. B, African countries were frustrated because all the commitments entered in the SDG about preventing, minimizing illicit financial flows, having a fair distribution of taxing rights at the global level were not bringing any results. And B, the OECD proposals, which when you do the income assessment from them, shows you that you will tax less than what we are taxing actually. I'm quoting the Tax Revenue Authority head of Nigeria, who said in a meeting with the OECD, actually, if we apply Pillar 1, we will end up taxing multinationals less than we are able to do that now. Why is this statement important? Because what you do in Pillar 1 is you renounce your taxing right of taxing multinationals, for example, introducing unilaterally the digital service tax. You have to say, we are not going to tax to agree to the pillar 1. You don't tax, that is exactly what the OECD thing is all about, to prevent you from taxing, not to allow you to tax more. So this combination galvanized the African group at the UN negotiations to say, we have been long waiting. Some of them were half Africa was part of the inclusive framework. There was nothing coming out of it. Companies are dodging taxes, illicit financial flows are growing. So we have now to go to the UN to end this mess. They started as an Africa Group initiative led by Nigeria. Immediately, they got the support of the G20, the G77, because Africa Group alone could not have moved anything. It was the solidarity of the support of the G77 for the Africa resolution, which brought together the numbers and enabled us to pass this resolution, despite the resistance and blockage tactics of the OECD countries. When the vote, what they did was they brought in amendments which would have watered down the proposal to almost nothing, heedless measures, cosmetic changes, but G77 countries stood together, they had their numbers, they blocked the amendments, they safeguarded the original resolution. Through this, the UN resolution on UN tax convention to start the process was not even voted because the rich countries saw they don't have the numbers to block it. So it was approved but that did not mean they gave up the struggle. Ever since the process started, they were trying to do two things. One is to go against the spirit and the content of the resolution itself by trying to bring in the things that were that were rejected in their amendment. They want to bring it up into the discussion to, to dilute it still further. The second one they are trying to do is split the G77 so that they can maintain, the old colonial practice of divide and rule. So far, G77 countries have stood together. That is the most important challenge. And this, not only such webinars, but what we do in our respective regions should reflect the importance of G77 unity to advance this agenda. They are united. If you look at if you look at the major OECD countries, the European Union together, they are united to block it or to dilute it, to pervert it. So the only possibility of preventing it is by upholding the unity of the G77 countries. I don't think co-opting some members into the G20 will make them the rulers of the world. G20, it is a G7 dominated enterprise. There is I don't think there is divergence of interest between the G20 members from the South and the other G77 members. There is a commonality of interest between Brazil and Niger. But there is no commonality of interest between Brazil and US multinationals. We belong together. The structure was created by colonial powers, which is prevailing in all our economies in Latin America and Africa and Asia. So we should not allow them to co-opt some members of us and make them feel that we are part of the rulers of the world. It is an illusion. The domination remains with the G77. The coalition should be all the world against the domination of G7. So thank you very much. And I'm honestly encouraged. I belong to the Bandung generation. Where the importance of the South-South collaboration was at its peak. I'm happy I'm getting older, but now it is coming back. There was a phase where it was losing relevance and losing coordination and what, but it is really coming back. So let us go back to the Bandung spirit and reinforce the unity of developing countries. We are not asking much. It is about recognizing our rights to tax multinationals which have generated their profits in our economies. We are not telling them, give us your money. It is about keeping the money that is generated in our economies. So thank you for the invitation. I stop here.
Thank you, Dereje. I love the enthusiasm and energy with which you mentioned the importance of South-South cooperation, and seeing that it is having results with the leadership of the African Union and Nigeria and the support of the G77. That makes us all very happy. Now, gladly, we are joined by Chennai Mukumba, the main lead of GTAJ for Africa. Chennai, you will have 10 minutes to speak a little bit about how you understand this process of the convention from this African civil society. Shania, you have the floor. You have 10 minutes. We do have also translation into Spanish and Portuguese, so you can speak English if you so like. Welcome, Shania. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, first of all, for the opportunity to be able to share on this platform about some of how we have been engaging in this process. A lot of what I had hoped to say has actually been covered by Dereje, and there's nothing that I think I can add that will sort of add more value to that, particularly because we've been in this work together. But I think what I can do is add a few dynamics to this conversation based off of the work that we've been trying to do on the continent directly with the Africa Union and the Africa Group. So I think for us, particularly if we're thinking about lessons learned, the major drive for this UN tax convention process, at least on the continent, drew from the high-level panel report that I think Dereje may have mentioned, right? That was launched and subsequently published in 2015. Currently, as I'm speaking to you, I am in Ethiopia. I'm participating in a preparatory conference for the Financing for Development 4 conference, which will be next year. The reason I say this is because at the Financing for Development 3 conference, the Africa Group actually had intended for a discussion on a UN tax convention to be tabled. But then due to a number of political issues, this didn't occur. However, African countries were not swayed. They had received their instruction, so to speak, from this publication that is really seminal to all of the work that we do on tax, this high-level panel report. And so if you were to trace the conversation, you'll see that literally from 2015 up until 2022, when we actually then saw the adoption of the resolution, the Africa Group was insistent that this remain a topic that be picked up by the global community and much more specifically by the United Nations. So I think for me, in thinking about the different lessons learned, I think it's important that all regions have one songbook, so to speak, that they refer to drive their agenda, right, at a global level with regards to how they want to engage in tax. And for us, this is the high-level panel report that was released in 2015. And in fact, next year we'll be celebrating, 10 years since the high-level panel report, and we'll be able to track progress, right, to see how well we've done. And of course, one of the things we will be celebrating will be this very sort of launch of this UN tax convention process. I think particularly for African countries, this is a very important process for a number of reasons. As Dereje had mentioned, there has been exclusion in terms of participation in the sort of global rulemaking for the tax system. And this has very, very direct impacts, right, on not only our attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals, but our own Agenda 63, right, which is the document that we use in order to determine how well we are meeting our own developmental objectives. So for us, that's quite a very personal issue in that respect, because the Agenda 2063 document flags that for us to achieve our developmental objectives, domestic resource mobilization must be the central pillar for that work. But if we have a global tax system that really undermines our efforts to do that, it undermines, right, the agenda that we have set for ourselves as a continent. And I think over and above that, our inability to participate in the global rulemaking process has meant that the outcome is one that is biased in favor of the rich countries that do have a seat at the table, right? One of the interventions that I made here at the FFD for conference was the fact that we need to revise the global tax rules, because at present they are skewed in favor of rich countries. And so we need to correct for that. And I think it's important, this is an important point, because it is not that global South countries, African countries want anything more than the very thing that is rightfully theirs, right? I think what it is that we want is the equitable distribution of taxing rights. And this is something that the Africa Group is very clear about in New York, right? That currently there's an unfair distribution, right? The current system that underpins all of this really undermines, right, global South countries' efforts for domestic resource mobilization. And this is what we want, a fair playing field. But I think what's really important about this is that when we talk about the fair distribution of taxing rights, this is not something that will only benefit global South countries, right? An equitable distribution of taxing rights is beneficial for the entire global community, right? We are all better off, right, if all of us are able to be able to meet our sustainable development goals, are able to meet our developmental objectives, right? And so I think another thing that has also underpinned the way the Africa Group has framed this, right, is that this is not just a global South issue. It's not just a developing country issue. This is something that all of us should be concerned about because it'll benefit all of us, right? It's a global community issue. So I mean, I think for me, in terms of the way that we are entering into this conversation, there is a resolute approach by the African Group. And they are insistent, right, that this process should continue, and they are willing to fight, right, for not, like I said, just themselves, but the global community at large. As I conclude, what I also want to say is that what this current discussion on a UN tax convention for me also communicates is a shift in the entire conversation of the international financial architecture. The reason I say this is because you see very similar skewed nature of multilateral agreements, not only in tax, but in debt, in trade, in investment, and even within, to some degree, overseas development assistance, right? And so if we are able as global South countries to really be able to push forward a multilateral solution, right, that allows for the equal participation of all countries. For me, this is the beginning, right, of the reform of an entire international financial architecture that has equal rights and equal benefits for all countries. And so I say this to indicate that this fight is more than just global tax. This fight really is for the democratization of the global economy, which, like I said, really stands to benefit all of us. So I'm going to conclude there. And once again, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak today.
Thank you so much, Chennai, for using the time and for such a clear and fair analysis of the process for the creation of the UN Convention and what it represents. It is a pleasure for us to have you. And as you say, we need an equitable distribution of tax rights will benefit us all, not just people in the South, because when it's even though we are organizing in the South to pressure people from the North, it is important to remark that we want to help everyone. It's important that for us to listen to Natalia Quiñones, who an international tax expert, who played a key role in the creation of PITLAC, which is the Latin American and Caribbean platform on taxation, who also represents not just in Africa, where we love what you did in Africa, but there is another movement here in Latin America of a union of all country regions regarding taxation. It is very new, and I must say it was an initiative led by Colombia, and so Natalia's participation, as well as a joint governmental effort that led to social participation mechanisms that are unheard of so far, at least particularly on taxation issues. So as Chennai said, we have more democracy, more voices heard from the South, but also more voices for everyone who is affected by unfair taxation everywhere. So Natalia, you have the floor to comment on this subject. Thank you, Natalie. I am very happy to be here today and to see Chennai again in particular, because what you mentioned, Natalie, about this burgeoning Latin American effort of collaboration is and can learn a lot from what has happened in Africa. I would like to briefly share a presentation about the importance of this movement in Africa. Last year, on November, I was at the Pan-African conference for illicit money flows, and it was important, and it was great for me to see how the Africans share an African identity that is almost above their national identity. Nigerians, Ethiopian, etc. And I felt that Pan-African movement has been key to achieve those important milestones that they have had so far in Africa and the African Union itself, and in general the Global South, in everything that is going on at the UN. During my intervention, I would like to talk a little bit about how we can move forward toward, yes, toward this common identity, such as the African, because we can see that there is a lack of a pan-Latin American movement and a pan-South American movement, even though it seems that we have plenty of things in common, and that all South American countries have an immense natural wealth, both mineral and biodiversity. We all share a colonial past that is very complicated and thorny, and in most countries we share a language. In Brazil, even though they speak Portuguese, we have Portuñol. We can totally understand each other. So, and there's many problems in this aggressive capitalist system that we have adopted as for our global economy, and we also have a great risk of suffering the consequences of climate change, even though it's not us who have contributed to global warming. On the contrary, our countries have helped and have continued to help the biodiversity and enough water power to counteract the global warming with our water basin. But despite all of these commonalities, we have not been able to achieve that Latin American joint identity, to see ourselves first as South Americans or Latin Americans beyond national identities, which are very marked still in our region. And those identities make it hard to reach these milestones, such as they have in Africa. Regarding taxation, we have several things that we share. For example, we have a great strength at the source on source imposition. We are experts in applying withholding taxes. We know how to design those regulations and how to successfully apply them. And that is why we have a great difficulty to tax mobile income and that which are not physically present in our territory. With a shared situation, one would think that all countries in Latin America, just like Africa, we could join in finding solutions that will strengthen withholding taxes at the source for mobile rents, and to find uh, common ways to tax this mobile income, such as our significant presence both in Africa and in Latin America. All our countries also share a tendency to adopt tax benefits to attract foreign investment. We want to increase jobs and infrastructure that bring these large taxpayers to our countries in general. The largest taxpayers are foreign companies, and we all want to have a piece of that pie and of that collection. And so what we do is end up competing one against the other. And so we make very high tax sacrifices that end up creating an excessive tax burden on people who on on workers. So what we want to have is a fixed tax base to help workers. So we also see this inequality because we see that passive income, that is, which is what what the wealthiest people receive, they benefit from a lower rate, and large multinationals have benefits that are far more expensive to the state than the benefits that the middle class could get. So it would seem that we all should share our need to aim to get other solutions to tax the higher classes. And Brazil has had a great leadership in the G20, looking for a tax or several tax measures to tax large wealth individuals. And this is something that we should support as Latin Americans, because even our large wealth individuals have changed their tax residence to escape these tax measures. We have to find a way to neutralize the effect of this side of the population. Lastly, on something else that we have in common, which the last in the list, but not the last one in general, is that we have limited expertise in human resources. The number of experts in taxes, international taxes particularly, is below the number we actually need to apply the complex regulation that we have created to, because we adopted OECD standards and all of that. So we have reached a very high complexity level with very few experts capable of enforcing it. And now that we're having these discussions on tax policy, we see that our treasury ministries, which should be the ones leading the charge and leading the policies, there's not a lot of experts who can truly explain on the inconveniences of some of the measures proposed by the OECD, as we heard before. So we could come together in adopting simple solutions and rejecting complexity altogether of our current regulation at, at the international level. These are just some first steps that we could take so that we all together could strengthen our integration at the regional level. Of course, the stronger we are regionally, the stronger this South cooperation will be. As PETLAC, as Natalie mentioned, has started very strong efforts to interact with the African Union and the African Bloc and the civil society in Africa in order to understand where we intersect. And there's plenty of coincidence, both as Dereje and Chennai said. We are part of the G77 and we have much more in common than with the rest of the OECD countries, even though our countries are in an adherence process to the group. So now I want to talk about speak on the civil society's role and congratulate you on holding this event, because indeed civil society is what groups and creates this openness in the government to identify common positions. What is happening right now in Africa, who always go to the UN with a great discipline and with a joint voice, always trying to maintain Africa's position before speaking about their national position. They are not mutually exclusive. We can have our differences and still defend whichever positions we have at the national level. However, African countries, when they speak at the UN, first, they will always underscore the African position, and then they will add their national position. I hope that we can reach that point in Latin America at some point. And we believe that the role of academia and civil society is greatly important to reach that openness at the government level. In PITLAC, we have worked on very good solutions in our technical work groups, both on taxation for individuals, on how we could reach that single global registry of final beneficiaries of all type of assets, not only financial assets, but also yachts, planes, real estate, and luxuries such as those, and how we could create global level taxes to counteract the large mobility of company income due to services and the highest classes and the wealthiest individuals. We have a large number of development in the environmental area, which could have a great traction, such as different protocols in the UN process and in OECD discussions. However, we need a greater identification of our countries with the possibility or potential that these solutions at the technical level bring to the interior of Pitlan. We are we have a large question, which is the Caribbean. Pitlag started as a Latin American platform that is inclusive, and as also to think that GRULAC, which is Latin American and Caribbean group at the UN, includes us all, not it's Latin America and the Caribbean. We would like to have uh, common positions at that level. However, there are some different languages and interests, and the economy that they have developed thanks to colonialism and their impact on Caribbean life. So we need to think about all of that, both from a civil society and academia standpoint, how we can use all of these historic colonial legacies to come together and find solutions that truly create better tax fairness for the civil society and the world. Listening to both Dereje and Shania, it might be important for us to think of the FACTI panel, which was a great landmark, which they had in 2015 in South Africa. We could maybe think of holding something similar for Latin America. What political leaders we could find to lead this type of initiative, and all work together around it so as to strengthen that regionalism and cooperation, South-South cooperation, to begin that important discussion with the public. Thank you very much for here giving me the floor. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Go back to you, Natalie. Thank you, Natalia. I would have a super interesting reflection and very honest as well of how we have learned from Africa and their discipline. But I think that they could also learn from us about social participation, which I believe is a great innovation by the Black. It happens in Africa in a different way, not as institutionalized as Bitlak, which I find great. This institutional participation achievement is great for our region. And in that sense, now I give the floor to our favorite university president, Cesar Montaño, who is very busy because his university is having its birthday. So we thank him for his availability and for his academic view of South-South cooperation and cooperation among these. Thank you, Cesar. Thank you, Natalie. I'm very glad to be here today with you and to share with you about our urgent subjects that we need to join together and work on. Thank you. Thanks to Natalia and everyone for being here, for giving me this invitation. It turns out that in this case, I am the university president of a regional university, the Simón Bolívar Andean University in Ecuador, which is for the Andean community incubation. We have been 32 years that we are turning, it's starting today and tomorrow specifically, working exclusively on our need to think about the integrationist project that we have pending still in Latin America, concretely in the Andean region. This has also been present in research and academia, And in these projects that are link us even every time more with civil society and working in the taxing area for a discipline that takes even more and more in account human rights, in particular taxpayer rights, that help us think in solutions that allow us to close the tax evasion gaps, which are very, very large and grave at the international level, touching every country with their tax management. Because every dollar, every resource that we do not receive from income and from activities that need to pay taxes, depending on their economic capacity, this it is one less dollar or resource that could be spent for social policies. So the first thing that we need to set out is that all of this topic is extremely important and extremely important and requires a comprehensive look to see the subject of income, policies, tax collection, and the use of resources created by that the application of a fairer tax system. The second subject that I want to cover is that this is a task that I am, this entire endeavor, I am very glad we are doing it, that to be considered part of this work that I think is key, to- so that we can all speak, sing it to the same tune and face the common challenges. Now more than ever, my friends, there are great, large issues like migration, corruption, climate change, the destruction of nature with large, the nature of tax havens and international tax evasion and international crime. Those problems cannot be faced by one state alone. States have been overcome in their ability to respond to these issues. We need to think at the international level to face these issues. However, there we find a great issue that most of our governors are not aligned in with that. They have enough problems at the national level, which also takes away the possibility of being part of a wider agenda that involves ways for international cooperation, because there are countries that have worked on these urgent topics. However, we're also missing this complement that can be activated to this platform, looking for a way to broaden, as Natalia said, all the way to Central America. We need to think about that. Academia can collaborate with this. And so I want to thank you for this invitation to participate here. We need to hold a meeting, hopefully here in presence. Here you have the Andean University here here in Quito, to continue to work together in common solutions. Third, I would like to tell you that in Latin America, sadly, we we have almost 10 simultaneous taxation processes, which makes that the countries to be playing in different courts with different rules and sometimes not even with the same shared objectives. So, regarding integration in Latin America, we have cases that do not correlate with each other and that do not really work with common ground about the rules, institutions, regulations. They are not similar. So the foreign services foreign to other countries get so exhausted, but we know these fronts when from civil society and from academia and so on. We should work on that approach, on a common approach. We have so many common problems, so let's find common solutions, because the states, as I said, have been overtaken in their ability to respond. So I think that strengthening this network and this initiative is mandatory. You could also something else too that is important. If you read the goals of Latin American integration agreements, let me quote some. So we have the Andean Community, Mercosur, UNASUR, Bolivarian Alternative for the Americas, the ICLAC, Prosur, SICAN, CARICOM. We have many integration processes, but we cannot speak the same language to build a Latin America that delves deep in solving its people's problems. We're talking about millions of people. We have 115 million member people from our member countries here in the Andean region. Imagine something more extended. How great Latin America jointly would be. I think we are missing regional leaders as well. We need to work on our leadership and common solutions. Those goals that are included in the agreements and integration processes see that they match the large objectives that mark the constitutions of each member country of every single one of these bodies. So all states need to prioritize democracy, answer to their citizens with more equity and equality. They need to set the stage to take our region to progress with social equity, acknowledging diversity and the rich diversity of our peoples. And we see that those objectives and goals match the constitution goals of each country. So now we need to permeate integration processes and take this agenda of common objectives to the institutional mechanisms and to integration processes. For example, in the Andean community, as Natalia will know, we speak the same language in common policy topics or common regimes. For example, the common regime to eliminate double taxation. We have adopted several regulations on TVA, the value-added tax in Latin America, for example, and as well as foreign trade and customs. So we need to a final touch, final compliment. Let's speak the same way on the subject of our citizens, of our goals that lead us to justice. I believe that we can propose in the PLAC, and you can count on the university for this, of a large fiscal agreement for Latin America and Central America and the Caribbean to set out a different kind of agreement because the technology that has arisen has made it impossible for states to take care of all of these issues alone and to control and monitor large wealth. So I think that working in a Latin American and Central American agreement, we can better serve our civil society. And of course, academia needs to accompany these initiatives, which are more than necessary today. And to close, to respect the time that was allocated to me, I think it is extremely important now more than ever to acknowledge how solutions have been adopted in other contexts. We need to look more toward Africa and the solutions that can be found, for example, in Europe, in Western Union, Europe as well, and other contexts, because countries face similar issues. The thing is that we also need to look toward others to see what might work for us. Some effective solutions have been applied, or to not make mistakes while applying solutions that worked elsewhere. So I believe that this cooperation and this south-south exchange of experts and academics that understand the problem is necessary. So once again, I salute this initiative and thank you for your invitation. And now, if you I'm available if you want to make any particular question. Thank you. I love your suggestion. We could maybe think about an event at the university there in Quito, bringing together PETLAC with its governance and social participation methods with the global African Union and the Global Alliance for Tax Justice. And we could hold a meeting on what we can learn from each other. I believe it would be great. There we will ask Dereje to we asked Dereje to get the money to hold that event because we have the venue now. We just need the money. You can count on us. Natalia knows our project very well, so she can help too. We have a few questions, but one question synthesizes everything, and it's for everyone. And as you answer, I ask that you please close out because we are over time. Before I make the question, I want to reinforce that we did a great work in this hour. Then the Rege clarified that there was a shift in power relations. Everything regarding taxation was based in the OECD, in power relations in the north, and that led to the South, particularly Africa, to push an agenda to deblock the work in the UN, which is an inclusive and legitimate space where where tax issues need to be discussed. And I then complemented the Regis input, saying that with this convention and as it's coming about at the UN, that there is a new movement is beginning regarding taxation and power relations that are more balanced and inclusive. We are at a key intersection for taxation. Natalia then told us, in a way, Latin America and the Caribbean learned from Africa's experience, but that there's still a long ways to go because we need to be far more aligned as a region. Unfortunately, we don't have the same discipline as Africa has shown, despite the great differences between the over 50 countries that are in Africa. And lastly, Cesar brought us at an important topic, and which is why why do we want other types of taxation regulation, not only coming from the north. We need to have a human rights based taxation system, and South cooperation are subjects that came from this point. And the question made by Emilia Mamberti on is for each of you panelists, if you had to choose one or two topics for a common songbook for both the regions in the current negotiations for a tax convention of the UN, what would there be? What are the one or two topics you have 2 to 3 minutes to answer and answer? So we're going to take the same order: Dereje, Shenai, Natalia, and Cesar. So Dereje.
Thank you. I think I have attended the different sessions up to now at the UN, and the positions and the alignment of forces has remained the same. What do we hear repeatedly? For me, the most important thing is to do two things. One is to counter the argument the UN should not duplicate the OECD. There is no duplication here. The international tax rules were formulated over 100 years ago, and they are still in practice. The League of Nations did it. The intermediary phase dominated by the OECD has not reformed them. These are things that have to fundamentally change. It is about making multinationals pay their taxes where they have generated their profits. It is about giving the legitimate right for source countries to tax the global profit of multinationals generated in their economies. There is no such a thing done up to now, so there is no duplication at all. And the second thing is, I was given a slot at one of the slots I was given at the United Nations. What I was saying is, if the OECD thinks its pillar 1, pillar 2 are the best solutions, instead of asking countries to take it as a package, let them introduce them as a proposal. Let the majority of countries at the UN say, okay, the OECD solution is adequate. What they want is, they want the package to be endorsed and left out of the negotiations. This is what is not acceptable. You cannot force sovereign countries to accept a package to which they were not parts. For example, even the inclusive framework, with all its limitations, more than half of African countries have not even participated. So the point is, don't try to bring it on us as a package. If you want the concrete proposals, they are acceptable to many countries, because all countries are there. If they are good for them, they will accept it. Let OECD unpack it and propose it singularly. So what they are trying to do is to carve it out and to say, this is global corporate income tax. This is outside the domain of the UN. It is technical. Let the OECD continue with it, and let the UN deal with other issues, like, for among everything, capacity building, cooperation of revenue authorities. They want to limit the scope and content of the UN. So that is something that we have to combat together. The second one, OECD is an oligarchy. And what is by definition an oligarchy cannot be democratized. Oligarchs are afraid of being equals. So that is why they don't want this rule-making thing to go to the OECD, the UN, where countries are negotiating with one another on equal basis. So the most important thing is to defend the integrity of the UN system, to take it as a global and universal membership organization that brings countries together on an equal footing to negotiate what is best for every country. This emphasis is very important. So it is not for us now to determine which article should be phrased in which form. That is now, we are not yet there. For now, it is about claiming back the right of the United Nations, the right of its members to agree on a procedure and a convention that covers the interest of all countries, not only developing countries. And for that, there should not be any carve out of issues which will be given to the OECD and not to the UN. They have no right to claim this. An international global cooperation should be conducted and negotiated within a universal membership organization. So for me, not less than important than the content is the defense of the UN, the process of the UN process itself, claiming the right back. In terms of international cooperation, the place to negotiate is the United Nations. The OECD can defend the interest of its members. There is no objection to that. But they should not impose the solution they brought for themselves on others. Let it be unpacked and discussed. If they get a majority, it will be that, but not a package. Not compel countries to agree to something they have not even participated in negotiating. So for me, that is the key issue, the integrity and the prerogative, the legitimacy of the UN to deal with these issues in which countries participate on an equal footing. That is the key issue. That is which needs to be defended by all developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Dereje. Clear and strong message of the legitimate and space to discuss involving the UN in general. That is a key point. Natalia, go ahead. What are the two topics or ideas or more that the regions need to work together in the convention? What is your opinion? Yes, Natalie, I agree with the idea that we need to be able to carry out a convention that covers all current and future taxation topics at the national level without exclusions and carve-outs. I think that needs to be the number one priority in our common songbook, as the question presented. Now, in the more substantive area, now that I have the floor, I think that we can move forward in two topics that cannot be alleged as duplication by the North, the global North, which is illegal fundings, and the taxing of large wealth individuals. Neither of those topics has ever been covered by the OECD, and so we are free from any argument about duplication, and they are key topics because the illegal funds is large, is a very large topic, and there is no way that we can use this taxation rules that are to locate things that are every time harder to locate. There are two substantive issues that I do think we should propose from the global South and Latin America. It would be those two, and always backing a totally broad scope in the framework convention to deal with any tax issue in the present or future. Thank you. Thank you, Natalia. Illegal flows and large wealth taxes are very important. Billionaires and millionaires, which are all key subjects for our region, which is because that's where the meat of the money that our taxes don't collect come from those and the tax evasion in those areas. And we want to, and that is what we're going to discuss at Quito University, where Cesar will preside over and organize with us. And now, Cesar, well, how would you open that event that we are going to hold next year, hopefully? And how would you open? What would you open with? One or two key topics? Thanks again, Natalie. During these interventions, we have seen some great coincidences. We are thinking about the same thing. If it's necessary to find two or three more topics, I would focus on the idea of thinking in commonalities, an international tax agreement. Well, by not continuing to think about these international agreements, we're going to empower or empower a space that not grant, but not to grant a space to civil society, but give it what it's already responds to them, to work among citizens, taxpayers, and companies that need to be there, and the state, and to think together of of tax regimes that and policies that lead us all to reaching all of our goals, the distribution, fairness, equity, and so on. I would insist in that idea. I think it would be a good topic to think jointly. We have an initial matrix, which is national tax agreements, which are sometimes renewed through constitutional reforms. I think it's time to think about that. And this is important because we share so many needs and problems, because a state alone cannot do a lot by itself. I think we can come up with one or two instruments to work with. And the other topic that is also related with what Natalia was saying, to fight these illegal financial flows, in the end, the background of it all are these initiatives, actions, and strategies and corruption networks that take resources from the state that are not set to taxation and also take from people. This has been driven by by new technological technological and virtual tools and environments. So another necessary topic needs to be the reflection on the necessary technological adaptation that needs to be done for to strengthen tax systems and structures. I think that is a structure that needs to be there, that collect from who needs to be collected from. And this also needs to touch the reset, how we set out our tax issues, because this lands in some laws and norms and regulations that need to be applied. So how do all of these elements that orbit that illusion of building a tax regime and policies that are fairer and that are better for the people, and which fight the grave tax evasion that we currently see? Thank you. Thank you, Cesar. Maybe during this road, I think that the UN Convention is already or already expresses that global agreement, and we hope that it will, where countries have and society has its voice and can join us. At ITLAC, we're working to build that agreement and to see if academia can help them go further in depth. Not all countries in the region are in the taxation platform. We want more countries to participate in it and to help us and to mimic the work of the African Union. This brings a close to the meeting. Thank you all for coming. If you wish to know more about this initiative of principles of human rights and taxation, please visit our website. It's very easy to find derechosypoliticasfiscales.org. Do you have plenty of information on the initiatives? Discloses them. So we want to thank everyone. Chennai had to leave because she's participating at an event, as she said, in Ethiopia. But I do want to thank Natalia, Cesar, and Deje for their participation. I know you are all very busy, so like Cesar with the birthday of his university. Thank you for the Deje from Paris, Natalia, and let's keep on going and to make the UN Convention to be our next taxation agreement. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you all.